1987, produced and distributed by Orion Pictures, was that of Robocop. The premise of the film held that in the then near future, the city of Detroit in the United States of America in the state of Michigan was near social collapse due to massive amounts of crime and not having enough natural resources for the people living within the city. Unable to get financial assistance from the American government, the city grants the multinational corporation of Omni Consumer Products, abbreviated as OCP, control of the Detroit Police Department. Meanwhile, Alex Murphy, played by Peter Weller, is transferred into the precinct and decides to help change the situation in Detroit. Along with his partner Ann Lewis, played by Nancy Allen, decide to pursue criminal Clarence Boddicker and his gang. Through events, Murphy is ambushed and tortured by the gang until Boddicker shoots Murphy, killing him. Later, what's left of Murphy's body is converted into what was later known as Robocop, a cybernetic organic being with no memories of his former life. Murphy then makes a huge impact with ridding crime out of Detroit as a mindless tool to bring back order to the city. Lewis sees the news and believes that Robocop is Murphy due to how he acts and uses his guns. During routine checks, Murphy accesses the entire Detroit police system of records and learns the details about his death and the fact that his wife and son had left the city under traumatic circumstances as a result of Murphy's death. This, along with further encounters with Lewis and Boddicker's gang, causes Murphy to remember details about his life. The situation with the police department and OCP doesn't get any better, and the force goes on strike, and all of Detroit falls into chaos as riots are breaking out across the city. Murphy and Lewis track down Boddicker and kills him as well as the members of his gang, as the film ends with Robocop handling OCP and eventually bringing back law and order to Detroit. At the time, public reaction to the film were favorable, and critics commented about the political and business-related corruption throughout Detroit, which were popular themes for television and film within the United States in the 1980s. The violence depicted within the film was emphasized so greatly that it was considered to be amusing to audiences as well as critics. A sequel would be released in 1990, being that of Robocop 2, which continued the story of Robocop and his partner of Lewis in Detroit against the OCP, which was also of similar themes to the original film. A third film was released in 1993, which had a fair amount of controversies about it due to the massive amounts of differences when in comparison to the first two films. A reboot for the Robocop film franchise dates back to roughly 2005, but it wasn't until 2008 that development for a reboot officially commenced. Film executives originally tried to have people which were involved with the first two films to return for the reboot, but eventually all new staff were brought in for the project. In 2011, Brazilian Jose Bahia was brought into the project to direct. Sources later mentioned that before official filming had begun, he had a horrible time directing. Apparently, producers and financiers had a particular desire for what the film should be, and a lot of what Bahia wanted to do wasn't actually allowed. When the design of the Robocop remake was first released to the public, there were stark comments of criticisms, with some mentioning that Robocop's appearance being too similar to that of Christian Bale's Batman suit from Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy of the early 2000s. As fans of the original two films, as well as critics, mentioned that there wasn't much of a robotic appearance with the armor when in comparison to the original Robocop design. In 2014, Robocop was released in theaters to an immediate backlash against the film from audiences as well as critics. After the film was released, further criticisms were discussed about public reactions to the amount of violence depicted within the film, which were less graphic when in comparison to the original, which had later become an endearing quality. All of the traits, features, and even characters of the original two Robocop films, an endearing reminder of what the late 1980s and early 1990s was within the United States. There were originally plans for a sequel, but due to the amount of disappointment of the 2014 remake, it was cancelled. A final insult against the film were that Lancey Allen later made public comments mentioning that modern films in the United States lacked real ideas, on that the trend of remakes weren't original, and quote-unquote iconic films shouldn't be remade. A character can be overrated yet hated due to a remake not being anything like the original it was based off of.